She never imagined that a tiny wounded bear would change her life forever. But that first glance in its eyes told her everything: fear, pain, and the quiet plea for help. In that moment, courage wasn't about being brave against danger. It was about staying when it would have been easier to walk away. The forest that day was quieter than usual. No birds, no rustle, just the wind moving gently through pine needles. 12-year-old Lila had wandered deeper than her parents would have liked, following the trail of wild raspberries she'd been picking for her mother's jam. She was used to this silence. The kind that made every sound, a twig snapping, a leaf falling, feel like a secret. But today that secret had a voice. A faint cry. It wasn't human. It wasn't far either. At first, Lila thought it was a dog, someone's lost pet from the nearby cabins. But when she followed the sound, she saw something she'd only ever seen from a distance before. A bear cub. Small, trembling, one paw twisted awkwardly under its body. Its fur was damp with blood and pine sap. Lila froze. Her first instinct screamed, "Run." That's what her father always said: if you ever see a bear, you don't stay to find out if it's friendly. But this wasn't a roaring animal. It wasn't even standing. It was crying. Lila looked around, heart pounding, scanning the trees. No movement. No heavy breathing. No sign of a mother nearby. Just this helpless little thing dragging its paw, whimpering in pain. Her breath caught in her throat. She took one careful step closer. Then another. The cub looked up, startled, and let out a weak growl, more like a plea than a threat. Lila crouched slowly, whispering, "It's okay. I'm not gonna hurt you." She didn't know why she said it. Maybe because she needed to hear it too. For a few seconds they just stared at each other, the girl and the cub, both scared, both unsure who should trust first. Then Lila saw the cause: a metal trap, half buried under leaves, clamped tight around the cub's paw. Her stomach twisted. She'd seen signs around the woods warning about illegal traps, some hunters trying to catch smaller animals. But a cub? Lila's voice broke into a whisper. "Oh no, they caught you." She wanted to cry, but she forced herself to breathe instead. She looked at the trap, rusty, sharp, locked tight. She didn't know how to open it, but she knew she had to try. Lila took off her scarf and approached slowly, every inch a decision. The cub flinched when she moved closer, teeth showing, body trembling. She froze again. Then whispered softly, I know it hurts. Please, let me help." Her hands shook as she touched the cold metal. She pressed against the latch with a stick, pushing as hard as her small arms could manage. The latch resisted. Then snap. The trap released. The cub yelped, pulling its paw free, then stumbled backward in confusion. Lila dropped the stick, breathing hard. Her knees gave out and she sat back in the dirt. For a long moment nothing moved. Then the cub limped forward, just a few steps, and sat beside her. Close enough that she could feel it shivering. Close enough that she knew it could have run. But it didn't. The forest seemed to breathe again. Birds called softly, the wind carried pine scent, and somewhere far away, water trickled through rocks. Lila reached into her pocket and pulled out the small cloth bag of raspberries she'd been collecting. "Here," she whispered, placing a few on a leaf near the cub. The cub sniffed, hesitated, then ate. Lila smiled, tears stinging her eyes. "You're welcome," she said softly. When the cub finally looked up again, its eyes met hers, wide, dark, and full of something that didn't feel like wildness anymore. It felt like trust. That night, when Lila went home, she didn't tell her parents. She couldn't. They'd forbid her from going back. But she knew she had to. Because courage, she was learning, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just whispers, "I'll come back tomorrow." The next morning, when Lila returned to the same spot, the cub was gone, but the leaves were freshly disturbed and something else was waiting there. A single paw print, larger than before. If you were Lila, would you return to the forest knowing a mother bear might be nearby, or would you let nature take its course? Lila woke before sunrise the next day. The air was crisp, her breath fogging in the cold morning. She packed quietly, a small basket with bread, a jar of water, and her mother's old first aid kit. The same one used for scraped knees and bee stings, now repurposed for a forest mission she couldn't tell anyone about. The memory of the cub's eyes wouldn't leave her. All night she dreamed of it, the sound of its cry, the weight of its trembling beside her. She couldn't stop wondering, was it okay? Did it survive the night? Her parents were still asleep when she slipped out. The forest was darker than yesterday, dew heavy on the leaves. Every step crunched softly, every sound amplified in the silence. Lila followed the same trail, the raspberry bushes, the fallen oak, the little dip in the earth where the trap had been. But when she reached the clearing, her heart dropped. The cub was gone. Only disturbed leaves, broken twigs, and a few smears of dried blood remained. She kneeled down, touching the soil as if it might tell her something. The blood trail led deeper into the woods, faint but visible. Her instinct said don't follow. But her heart said you have to. And so she did. The deeper she went, the quieter it became. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. The sunlight filtered through the branches, patching the forest floor with moving shadows. Then she saw it. A flash of brown fur. Movement among the ferns. The cub, limping but alive. Lila exhaled, relief washing over her. "Hey," she whispered softly, stepping closer. "I told you I'd come back." The cub turned its head, ears twitching. It recognized her. Its paw was swollen but the bleeding had stopped. She placed the basket on the ground, slowly kneeling again. She unwrapped a piece of bread, dipped it in water and placed it near the cub. It sniffed, then began to eat carefully, glancing up between bites as if to make sure she wasn't leaving. Lila smiled faintly. "Good. You're learning to trust me, huh?" But then, something else stirred. A sound, deep, low, and unmistakable. A growl. It came from behind her. Slow, deliberate, powerful. Lila's breath froze midair. She didn't turn immediately, she didn't have to. The hairs on her neck told her exactly what stood behind her. A mother bear. Lila's heart pounded so loud it drowned out the forest itself. She turned her head just enough to see the shape, massive, dark brown eyes fixed on her. The mother's breathing was steady, heavy, protective. The cub looked up, letting out a soft cry. The mother's ears flicked toward it, but her gaze never left Lila. For a few seconds no one moved. Then, slowly, Lila lifted her hands, palms open, trembling. "It's okay. I'm not hurting your baby," she whispered. "I helped him." Her words were meaningless to the bear, but her tone wasn't. Animals didn't understand language. They understood intention. The mother stepped forward once, heavy paw against dry leaves. The sound was enough to make Lila's knees shake. Every instinct screamed to run, but something deeper told her not to. If she ran, she'd become prey. If she stayed, maybe she'd be forgiven. She lowered her eyes, crouching slowly, backing away just enough to show respect. "I'm sorry," she murmured, voice breaking. "I didn't mean to scare you." The mother sniffed the air, short, cautious breaths. Her eyes softened just slightly as she looked at the cub limping toward her. It rubbed its head against her leg, letting out a quiet whimper. Lila watched as the mother leaned down, licking the cub's injured paw. The tenderness in that motion made Lila's chest ache. For a moment, fear faded, replaced by awe. This wasn't the terrifying creature her father's hunting stories described. This was a mother. And Lila understood something she'd never thought about before. Fear wasn't the opposite of courage. Love was. Because when you loved something enough, a child, a cub, an idea, you stopped running. The mother bear looked at Lila once more, eyes deep and unreadable, then turned toward the woods. The cub followed, limping but stronger than before. Lila stayed perfectly still until both disappeared behind the pines. Only then did she exhale. Her hands were shaking so hard she dropped the bread basket. She should have been terrified. But instead she felt peaceful. Like the forest had seen her, tested her, and let her live. She gathered her things ready to head back, but just as she turned, something caught her eye. Near where the cub had been eating lay a torn strip of her scarf, the one she'd used to free the trap yesterday. It was missing when she got home. Now it lay there, damp with morning dew. She picked it up slowly, smiling through tears. Maybe it meant nothing. Or maybe the cub had kept it. As Lila began to walk home, a distant sound echoed from deeper in the forest, not a growl this time but the sharp crack of a gunshot. She froze. The bears were headed that way. The echo of the gunshot rolled through the valley like thunder that didn't belong. For a heartbeat, the forest froze. No birds, no wind, no movement. Just that silence after violence when even nature seemed to wait. Lila's stomach twisted. She knew what gunfire meant out here. Her father wasn't a hunter, but plenty of men in town were, men who bragged at the diner about chasing nuisance bears. Her fingers clenched around the torn piece of scarf she'd found near the cub. "They're going that way," she whispered. "Please don't let them find you." Every sensible part of her wanted to run home, tell her parents, call the rangers, do the right adult thing. But then she remembered the cub's limp, the way it had looked at her with eyes that trusted her, even when it shouldn't have. Could she really just walk away now? Her throat burned. Her knees trembled. Yet somehow her feet moved on their own, following the faint path where the bears had gone. The deeper she went, the darker it became. Clouds swallowed the morning light. A mist crept low between the trees, clinging to her boots. Every step sounded louder than it should have. Once she thought she saw a shadow move between trunks, big, slow, deliberate. But when she blinked, it was gone. She was scared. But underneath the fear was something sharper: determination. She told herself, if they're in danger, I'll just make noise. I'll scare the hunters away. She didn't have a plan beyond that, but courage doesn't wait for plans. The trail widened into a rocky slope. Halfway down, she spotted something that stopped her cold: a glint of metal. A hunting rifle resting against a stump. Beside it, voices, two men, low and rough. "Tracks lead that way," one said. "Cub and mother both. Shouldn't be far." Her pulse hammered so hard she thought they'd hear it. She crouched behind a fallen tree, clutching the scarf in both hands. The older man kicked at the dirt. "Damn traps keep getting sprung. Something's been messin' with them." "Foxes?" the younger one asked. "Nah," the older man muttered. "Too clean. Like someone knows what they're doing." Lila's heart sank. They were talking about her. She could run. She could shout and give herself away. Or she could try something else. She remembered how her father scared off coyotes once, banging a metal pot until the sound echoed across the hills. No pots here. But she had her water jar. And courage, maybe. She lifted it carefully, slipped out from behind the log, and threw it as far as she could. It smashed against a rock, echoing sharp through the valley. The men turned instantly. "What the?" "Over there." They moved toward the sound, weapons ready, hearts distracted. Lila used the chance to slip the other way, following the bear tracks deeper into the forest, her shoes sinking into wet soil. Minutes stretched into hours. The mist thickened, swallowing distance. Lila's breath came in gasps, her lungs aching. Then she saw movement, two shapes ahead, dark against the white fog. The mother bear and cub. They were climbing toward a rocky ledge, the cub limping behind. The mother kept pausing to look back, ears twitching as if she too sensed danger. Lila wanted to call out but didn't dare. Instead, she picked up a stick and scratched a pattern on a rock, a quick warning mark her father had taught her for hikes. Danger. If the hunters came this way, maybe they'd see her sign and turn back. Maybe. The wind shifted, carrying voices again. Closer this time. She looked up the ridge. The bears were struggling to climb, the cub slipping on loose stones. The mother nudged it forward, growling softly. Then a gunshot cracked again, closer, sharper. Lila ducked instinctively. A flock of birds burst from the trees. The bears startled, the cub tumbling down a few feet. The mother rushed to shield it, roaring, not at the shot, but at the echo that seemed to chase them. Lila knew she couldn't stay still anymore. She scrambled up the slope, grabbing roots for balance, stones cutting her palms. "Go," she whispered through tears. "Run." Her voice carried, faint, human, desperate. The mother bear turned at the sound. Their eyes met again. Something passed between them, not recognition but understanding. The bear growled once, deep and resonant, then turned away, nudging the cub toward a gap in the ridge that led into denser trees. Lila smiled in relief, until she heard the crunch of boots behind her. "Hey!" a man's voice shouted. "Who's there?" She spun around, too late. The younger hunter was already aiming, not at her, but at the movement above, the mother bear's shape vanishing into the pines. "Don't!" Lila screamed. "Stop!" The man hesitated. The older hunter came running up, rifle ready. "What the hell, a kid?" But she didn't stop shouting. "You can't. They're just trying to get away." The older man frowned, lowering his gun slightly. "You've got no business out here, girl." "She's hurt. The cub's hurt. Please, just let them go." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the older man sighed. "Fine," he muttered, waving a hand. "They're moving uphill anyway. Not worth the trouble." The younger one looked disappointed but obeyed, lowering his rifle. They turned back, grumbling about wasted bullets and damn kids ruining hunts. When they disappeared into the trees, Lila collapsed against the rock, shaking. The forest slowly filled with sound again, the drip of melting frost, the distant call of an owl. She'd done it. She'd stopped them. But as she looked toward the ridge, she realized something chilling. The bears were gone, yes, but so was the sun. The forest was dimming fast. And now she had to find her way home, alone. As darkness closed in, a new sound echoed through the forest, low, rhythmic, deliberate. Not human footsteps this time. Something following. Lila turned slowly toward the noise, her breath caught in her chest. The next few days became a test of patience, hope, and quiet bravery. Every morning before school, Lily would tiptoe out to the shed, holding her breath until she heard the faintest rustle inside. It was always there, that soft shifting sound that told her the cub was still alive. She had named him Ash after the color of his fur, and because she found him near the edge of an old fire-scorched patch of forest. Each day brought new challenges. Ash refused to eat at first, turning his head away from the mashed berries and oatmeal Lily offered. His tiny body trembled when she tried to clean his wounds. But Lily persisted, not out of recklessness, but out of the strange, fierce tenderness that only a child can hold. Her mother's medical kit became her best ally. A roll of bandages, antiseptic cream, a thermometer she didn't really know how to use but held against his ear anyway. At school she found herself distracted. Her friends gossiped about weekend trips and new games, but Lily's mind was miles away, in the shed, wondering if Ash was cold, if he missed his mother, if he knew she was trying to help. When she returned home that evening, something was different. The shed door creaked and she froze. The straw pile had shifted. Ash wasn't lying down anymore. Instead, he was sitting upright, blinking in the golden afternoon light, his dark eyes locked on her. Lily gasped softly. "You're awake, really awake," she whispered. She knelt, holding out her hands slowly. Ash didn't retreat this time. Instead, he sniffed her fingers, his nose twitching, and then, almost uncertainly, licked the tip of her thumb. It was a moment so fragile that even the air seemed to pause. From that day their rhythm changed. Lily would sneak pieces of apple and small bits of bread to him, whispering as if words alone could heal. "You're going to be okay, Ash. You have to be." And somehow he listened. Each evening, as the sun sank behind the forest, she would watch him take unsteady steps across the shed. His limp was still there but less pronounced. His growls softened into whimpers, then into quiet, rhythmic breaths. But the closer Ash came to recovery, the more the weight of reality pressed on Lily's heart. She began to understand, a bear couldn't stay hidden in a human home forever. If anyone found out, the rangers would come. They might take him away or worse, see him as a threat. One night as she brushed Ash's fur, her father called from the kitchen. "Lily? You keep leaving the shed door open. You know raccoons will start coming in." Her pulse jumped. She shouted back, "Sorry, Dad. I'll check it tomorrow." She closed the shed door quietly and turned back to Ash, who was resting his head on her lap. "They can't know," she murmured. "Not yet. But secrets have a way of growing heavy, and soon the world outside would force hers into the open." The turning point came the following week. Lily arrived home from school to find the shed door open. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "Ash?" she called out. No sound. No movement. The straw bed was empty. She dropped her backpack and ran into the trees, calling his name again and again. The forest echoed, but there was no reply. Branches scraped her arms as she stumbled deeper, her throat tightening with panic. Then she saw it, a small paw print in the mud, leading toward the ridge. Relief and fear collided inside her chest. He was alive. But he was out there, alone, hurt, and surrounded by dangers far greater than she could protect him from. As she climbed higher, she caught sight of movement between the trees, a flash of brown, a limp, a familiar shape. "Ash!" she cried. The cub stopped. For a brief second, their eyes met across the clearing. He made a soft sound, almost like a whine, and then something cracked in the distance. A low growl followed. Lily froze. It wasn't Ash. It was deeper, heavier, older. A bear. A real, grown bear, and it was close. Her heart pounded so loud she could barely hear her own breath. She looked at Ash, then toward the sound. Somewhere behind those trees, his mother might still be alive, or another bear, drawn by the scent of her cub. She had to decide. Run or stay. Her hand trembled as she reached toward Ash, who whimpered softly but didn't move. Every instinct screamed for her to flee. But the look in Ash's eyes, that same terrified, pleading look from the first day, anchored her to the ground. She took one shaky step closer. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm here." The forest around her seemed to hold its breath. The rustling stopped. The air grew still. Somewhere in that silence, a shadow moved between the trees, large, slow, and unmistakably watching. Was it friend or threat? Lily didn't know. But one thing was certain. The forest was no longer just a place of healing. It was now the stage for a test of courage she never expected to face. If you were in Lily's place, would you risk facing a full-grown bear to protect the cub you saved, or step back and trust nature to take its course? The air hung heavy, so thick that every breath Lily took felt like swallowing fog. The forest that had once whispered comfort now pulsed with quiet danger. Ash pressed closer to her legs, trembling, his injured paw dragging in the dirt. Somewhere beyond the trees, the shadow shifted again, slow, deliberate, and watching. Lily's heart hammered so hard it almost drowned out the wind. She wanted to run, but her legs refused to obey. The thought flashed through her mind, if I move too fast it might chase. Her father's voice echoed in her head, those countless warnings he gave before letting her explore the woods alone. Animals aren't bad, Lily. But they're not like us. Fear them and they'll fear you more. She crouched low beside Ash and whispered, "It's okay, don't move." Ash whimpered softly, his breath quick and shallow. She could feel his heartbeat thudding against her palm. Slowly she turned her head toward the movement, and there it was. A massive grizzly, its fur matted with rain and leaves, stood halfway between the trees. Its eyes glinted with intelligence, not rage. The sound Lily heard wasn't a growl anymore, it was something softer, like a low hum vibrating through the ground. The mother. Lily realized it instantly. This was Ash's mother, searching, calling, following the faint scent of her cub. A wave of relief washed through her, followed immediately by dread. Because if the mother bear thought Lily was a threat, this forest would become her final resting place. She slowly knelt, her movements small, careful. "He's yours," she whispered shakily, as if the bear could somehow understand. "I was just helping him." Ash gave a faint, broken cry. The mother bear froze. Her nostrils flared. She took a few hesitant steps forward, sniffing the air. Every nerve in Lily's body screamed for her to move, but she didn't. She stayed still, heart racing, breath shallow, watching the raw, wordless language of nature unfold. Then something unexpected happened. The bear stopped just a few feet away. Her towering frame blocked the evening sun, casting both Lily and Ash in her shadow. Her head tilted slightly, and her gaze dropped to her cub. Ash limped toward her, slow, weak, but determined. The sight nearly broke Lily's heart. She wanted to cheer, to cry, to run, but she didn't dare move. Ash reached his mother's leg, pressing against it with a soft, desperate sound. The mother responded with a deep, resonant huff, a sound so primal and gentle it silenced the entire forest. Lily couldn't breathe. She just watched, a silent witness to reunion. But as the mother turned her head toward her, Lily saw something in the bear's eyes that froze her again, awareness. Not human understanding but something older. Recognition. The bear didn't attack. Didn't roar. It only looked, long enough for Lily to understand that she was not unwelcome but dismissed. Then with a single deep breath, the mother nudged Ash, guiding him deeper into the trees. Lily wanted to follow but her legs finally gave out. She sank to the ground, trembling with adrenaline and awe. The forest began to breathe again, leaves rustling, birds calling, the wind exhaling through the branches. And just like that, they were gone. She sat there for minutes or maybe hours. Time had dissolved into something weightless. When she finally found the strength to stand, the clearing was empty except for a faint trail of paw prints leading toward the mountains. She traced one print with her fingers and smiled through her tears. "Goodbye, Ash," she whispered. "You made it home." But as she turned back toward her house, her relief gave way to something heavier, the fear of what she'd have to explain. When she stepped into the yard, her father was waiting, a stern look on his face. "Lily," he said slowly, "why are there bear tracks all over the property?" Her mouth went dry. I found a cub," she confessed. "It was hurt. I didn't want to tell you because I knew you'd—" "Because I'd stop you?" he interrupted, his voice rising, half in anger, half in disbelief. "Do you have any idea how dangerous that was?" "I know," she said softly. "But he needed me." Her father's expression softened, just a little. "And what happened?" She swallowed hard. His mother came back. The silence that followed was long and strange. Her father's jaw tightened, then relaxed. He sighed, looking out at the woods. "Then you did the right thing," he said finally. "Even if it scared me half to death just hearing about it." That night, as rain began to fall again, Lily lay awake listening to the storm. Her heart still raced with the memory of those dark eyes watching her through the trees. Fear and wonder mixed in her chest like twin storms colliding. She realized something profound. Courage wasn't about being unafraid. It was about being terrified and still choosing to care. Weeks passed. The shed returned to its quiet emptiness. The forest healed itself and so did Lily. But sometimes, on still mornings when fog clung to the ground, she would hear something faint echoing from the woods, a low, familiar hum that only she seemed to recognize. And every time she smiled. Because she knew somewhere out there, a bear cub named Ash remembered her too. Lily froze. Her breath caught midair, the sound of the cracks still echoing somewhere between the trees. The forest, moments ago gentle and alive, now felt too quiet, as if every creature was holding its breath. She turned slowly toward the sound. "Hello?" she called, voice trembling. No answer. Her pulse thudded in her ears. The tall pines swayed slightly, their shadows shifting across the ground. For a moment she thought she saw movement, a faint outline between the branches. It wasn't the broad, hulking shape of a bear. It was smaller. Upright. Human. Lily's heart stuttered. She took a cautious step back toward the path leading home. "Who's there?" she tried again, louder this time. A man's voice replied, distant, rough, and deliberate. "You shouldn't be out here alone." Her stomach dropped. She could see him now, a ranger or at least someone dressed like one. Green jacket, wide hat, binoculars hanging from his neck. He emerged slowly from behind a tree, hands slightly raised, not in threat but in warning. "I heard a bear," he said, scanning the treeline. "You didn't see it, did you?" Lily's throat went dry. She hesitated. I saw one," she whispered. "But it's gone now." He frowned. "Gone?" "Yes. It was looking for her cub." At that, his expression changed, not anger but recognition. "You mean the injured cub people mentioned near the ridge?" Her pulse quickened. "How did you?" He sighed. "We've been tracking it for days. There were reports of a small bear limping around near the trail. We thought it might have been separated from its mother during the storm." Lily's heart twisted. She wanted to tell him everything, how she found Ash, how she fed him, how she watched him heal. But something in his tone made her hesitate. "What would you do with it if you found it?" she asked carefully. The ranger looked at her for a moment before answering. "If it's too injured to survive, we'd have to take it to the wildlife center. But if it's recovered, it needs to stay wild. Human care can do more harm than good." Lily swallowed hard. She felt that truth like a quiet ache. "It's with its mother now," she said finally. He nodded slowly. "Then maybe you did more good than you realize." For a brief moment his gaze softened, almost proud. "Still," he added, glancing toward the woods, "be careful. A mother bear this close to town can be dangerous. Stay away from this area for a while, okay?" She nodded, though her heart pulled toward the direction where Ash had disappeared. The ranger adjusted his hat and began to walk away. "You've got courage, kid," he said without turning back. "But courage doesn't mean you don't get scared, it just means you care enough to face it anyway." Lily stood there for a long time after he left, his words echoing faintly against the rustle of leaves. Then she looked toward the trees one last time. The path home felt longer that evening. Every step carried the weight of what she had done, and what she had learned. She wasn't just a girl who saved a bear cub. She was a girl who learned what it meant to let go. When she reached her backyard, her father was on the porch, eyes wide with worry. "Lily, you were gone for hours." She ran to him and he knelt, pulling her into a tight hug. For a moment she couldn't speak, just pressed her face against his shoulder, breathing in the smell of smoke and rain. "I saw the ranger," she finally managed. "He said the bears are safe now." Her father exhaled deeply, relief softening the tension in his face. "Good," he said quietly. "Then maybe it's time to let the forest take care of its own." That night, as Lily lay in bed, the rain began to fall again, slow, steady, like a heartbeat against the roof. She thought of Ash's small paw pressed against her palm, of his eyes filled with both fear and trust. She thought of the moment he disappeared into the trees beside his mother. And for the first time since she found him, she smiled without sadness. Weeks later, when spring finally began to melt the frost, Lily returned to the forest. Not to search but simply to walk, to listen. The ground was damp, the air clean. She stopped by the clearing where she had last seen them. The grass had grown tall again, wildflowers blooming between the roots. Then she saw it, near the base of a tree. A single claw mark scratched faintly into the bark. Too deliberate to be random. Too low to be from a grown bear. Her breath caught. She reached out and touched it, tracing the curve of the mark with her fingertip. "Ash," she whispered. "You're okay." The wind stirred the branches above her, carrying with it a low, familiar hum, that deep, gentle sound she'd heard before. She smiled. It wasn't goodbye anymore. It was something else. It was understanding. Spring deepened, turning the forest into a cathedral of green. Streams that had frozen over months ago now sang softly through the roots of pine and birch, their sound blending with the distant chatter of birds. Lily walked along a narrow path she had come to know by heart, not the main trail, but the one that curved quietly around the ridge, where the trees seemed to recognize her. Every visit since that day had been quiet, careful. She no longer came with food or fear. She came to listen. To learn what silence could say when she stopped trying to fill it. Sometimes she found footprints, faint but real, pressed into the wet soil. Not large enough to be the mother's. Not small enough to be a fox or raccoon. The same steady size each time, spaced farther apart as weeks went by. Growing stronger. Ash was alive. The thought made her chest ache, not with sadness but with something like pride. He didn't need her anymore. And that was the point all along. Still, the human world didn't stop spinning. Her father began taking her on weekend hikes again, though now, every time they entered the forest, he'd give her a look, half stern, half amused. No more secret rescue missions, right? She'd smile. Promise. Yet sometimes, when they passed a clearing, he'd notice her glancing off the trail, her eyes scanning the undergrowth as if searching for a familiar shadow. You still think about it, don't you? He asked once. Every day, she admitted. But not like before. He nodded. That's how you know you've grown. You don't need to hold on so tight to the things you love. Sometimes letting them go is the kindest thing you can do. Those words stayed with her long after they left the woods that day. One evening, as the sky bruised into shades of violet and gold, Lily wandered out again, this time alone. The air smelled like pine sap and rain. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the rhythmic tapping of a woodpecker. The world felt peaceful, but she couldn't shake the sense that something was different. She followed the sound of running water until she reached the small creek that cut through the valley. The same creek where she'd first carried Ash home. The place looked almost unrecognizable now. No snow, no silence, just the living hum of spring. As she knelt to fill her hands with the cold water, a sound froze her in place. Aloha. Familiar. Her heart leapt. Slowly she turned her head. Across the creek, standing just beyond the tree line, was a bear. Not as large as the mother had been, but no longer the fragile cub she once held. His fur gleamed in the evening light, darker now, with that same ash-gray tint that had inspired his name. He was taller, stronger, his movements slower, deliberate. He watched her with the same quiet curiosity she remembered, but now there was distance. Not fear. Not threat. Just recognition. Lily didn't move. She barely breathed. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, two beings from different worlds bound by something wordless. Ash took one step forward, his paw sinking softly into the mud. The water rippled between them. Lily smiled, tears already stinging her eyes. You remember, don't you? She whispered. He tilted his head slightly. The wind caught his fur, and for a second she thought she saw the cub he used to be, small, trembling, scared. But then the image shifted, replaced by what he had become. Strong, independent, unafraid. He made a soft, deep sound, not quite a growl, not quite a call. Then, as gently as he had appeared, he turned and walked back into the trees. Lily stayed by the creek long after he vanished, her reflection trembling on the surface of the water. The forest around her returned to its calm rhythm, as if it too had witnessed something sacred. She finally stood, brushing the dirt from her jeans. There was no sadness this time. No ache. Just peace. As she made her way home, fireflies began to blink to life in the fading light. Their glow shimmered like tiny stars scattered among the branches. She realized then that courage didn't end when fear did. Courage was continuing to care even when you had to let go. And somewhere deep in the forest, beneath the whisper of leaves and the song of the creek, a young bear lived freely, because a girl once believed he deserved a chance. Later that night, as Lily sat by her window, she thought she heard the faintest sound drift in from the distance. A low, familiar hum. She smiled softly to herself, whispering into the dark, "Good night, Ash." This time she didn't wait for an answer. The following summer came early, painting the forest in deep emerald hues. The snow had long melted, leaving behind trails rich with the scent of pine and soil. The air was thick with the hum of insects and the songs of unseen birds. Lily had grown taller, her voice steadier, but her connection to the woods remained the same, quiet, reverent, alive. She had stopped visiting as often, not because she didn't want to, but because she felt the forest no longer needed her visits as proof of her bond with it. It lived in her now, in the way she noticed the wind, or the way she paused before stepping on moss. Still, sometimes at dawn she would take her camera and wander down the old ridge path, the one that led to the creek where everything began. She wasn't looking for Ash anymore. But a small part of her always hoped. That morning, the light fell in soft slants through the trees, painting the undergrowth in shifting gold. She stopped to photograph a butterfly perched on a fern when she heard something, a sound too heavy to belong to a bird or deer. She turned, heart quickening. A shape moved in the distance, low, powerful, deliberate. Her hands trembled as she raised her camera. Through the lens, she caught the faint outline of a bear halfway hidden behind the foliage. The first thought that came was Ash. But as she zoomed in, she realized this bear was larger, broader. His coat darker, his frame heavier. Not Ash, not his mother. Another. The bear stopped, sensing her presence. For a few seconds, it stared directly into the lens, its gaze deep, wild, yet calm. Then, without a sound, it turned and walked toward the ridge, following a narrow trail leading up the mountain. Lily's curiosity overpowered her caution. She followed at a distance, careful not to snap a twig. The higher she climbed, the thinner the air grew, the forest thinning into scattered trees and rocky slopes. When she reached the ridge, she froze. Far ahead, near the tree line, stood two bears, the large one she'd seen, and beside it, another slightly smaller but strikingly familiar. Her breath hitched. It was him, the same ash-gray hue, the same steady way of standing. He had grown, his shoulders broader, his movements more confident. The second bear, perhaps his mate or simply another of his kind, lingered close to him, foraging between the roots. Lily sank to her knees, overwhelmed. She didn't call out this time. Didn't move. She simply watched, knowing that if she made a sound, the fragile magic of this moment would shatter. Ash lifted his head, sniffing the air. For a fleeting second, their eyes met across the open ridge, the human who once saved him and the bear who had learned to survive. The wind shifted, carrying her scent toward him. He didn't run. Didn't growl. He only stood still, as if acknowledging her. Then, slowly, he turned toward the forest beyond the ridge, the vast expanse of wilderness that stretched for miles, wild and untouched, and began to walk toward it. The other bear followed. Lily's eyes blurred. She didn't chase. She didn't speak. She just sat there, her heart full and aching. Watching them disappear into the horizon felt less like loss and more like witnessing the end of a promise kept. She stayed until the last shadow faded into the trees. Then, lifting her camera, she snapped one final photo, not of Ash himself but of the ridge, the sunlight breaking through the mist where he had stood. Later, when she looked at the photo, something unexpected appeared in the frame. Faint paw prints pressed into the soft earth, perfectly illuminated by the morning sun. She smiled, whispering, "Goodbye, my friend." That evening, she returned home quieter than usual. Her father noticed. "You found something out there?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Not something. Someone." Her father smiled gently. "And?" "He's where he belongs," she said. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "So are you." That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat by her window again, moonlight spilling across her desk, the forest a dark ocean beyond the glass. Somewhere deep in those trees, she imagined Ash climbing through the pines, his breath visible in the cool night air, his heart beating to the same rhythm as hers once did. And for the first time, she didn't feel the distance between them. She felt connection, invisible, ancient, and enduring. Because what she'd shared with that cub wasn't ownership. It was understanding. And understanding, she realized, never really ends. But just as she leaned back in her chair, a low, distant sound broke the silence. A rumbling echo from the ridge. Not thunder. Not wind. A bear's call. Deep, resonant, familiar. Lily froze, her eyes widening as it rolled through the valley, fading slowly into the night. She smiled through her tears. "I hear you," she whispered. And somewhere, far up the mountain, a bear paused mid-stride, ears twitching, head turning slightly toward the town below, before disappearing once again into the wild. If you knew the one you helped had truly grown free, would you still long to see them again, or would you find peace in never crossing paths once more? The winter months rolled by, soft and endless. Snow swallowed the trails she once followed daily, covering the earth in silence. Lily spent those days replaying every moment she'd had with Ash. The smell of wet pine, the warmth of his fur, the tiny sounds he made when dreaming. Her father often found her by the window, sketching bears in the fogged glass, lost between memory and hope. When spring finally broke through, the world breathed again. The forest shimmered with new leaves and the river roared with melted ice. On the first warm day, Lily packed her small backpack, just water, bandages, and a scrap of the old blanket she'd once wrapped around Ash. Her father didn't stop her this time. He simply nodded and said, "If the forest remembers you, it'll show you the way." As she stepped past the familiar clearing, the air felt different, older, heavier, like the woods themselves had changed. She noticed claw marks on a tree trunk higher than her head. It wasn't Ash, this was from something bigger. Yet she kept going, trusting her heartbeat to guide her deeper. When she reached the old hollow log, she froze. It was empty, but lined with newer moss, larger footprints, and a faint scent she could never forget. Ash had been here. Recently. Her pulse raced as she followed the tracks down to the creek. And there, on the far bank, stood a young bear, massive now, its coat darker, its shape stronger, but its eyes still held that same calm gold. Lily dropped her bag, hands trembling. Ash, she whispered. The bear lifted its head slowly, watching her. For a moment, neither moved. Then Ash took a hesitant step forward, nostrils flaring as if recognizing something deeper than scent. Lily knelt in the grass, tears welling. You remember me, don't you? The bear didn't growl, didn't back away. It simply stood there, quiet, breathing, alive. And in that silence, something passed between them that words could never carry. But before the moment could settle, a sudden noise shattered it, a sharp metallic click echoing from the ridge above. Lily's eyes darted up. Two men stood near the trees, hunters. One of them raised his rifle, squinting through the scope. No, she shouted, leaping to her feet. Don't shoot. Her voice startled Ash, who retreated a step, confused and alert. But the hunters didn't lower their weapons. To them it was just another bear too close to town. Lily did the only thing she could. She ran toward Ash, arms wide, shouting, "He's not dangerous." Her heart thundered as she stood between the bear and the rifles, chest heaving. One hunter yelled, "Kid, move." But she didn't. She looked right at him and said, "If you shoot, you'll have to shoot me too." The forest seemed to hold its breath. Wind whispered through the trees and Ash stood still, watching her like he understood what she was doing. After a long, tense silence, one of the hunters lowered his gun. "Let's go," he muttered. "Not worth it." The other hesitated but finally followed, their footsteps fading back into the woods. Only then did Lily's knees give out. She collapsed onto the grass, shaking. Ash stepped closer, lowering his massive head near her shoulder, his breath slow and warm. She smiled through her tears. "You're really here." For the first time since that day she found him in the ravine, she felt whole. But before peace could settle, Ash suddenly tensed, his ears pricked, eyes fixed behind her. Lily turned, expecting the hunters again, but what she saw froze her in place. Another bear was there. Much larger. Its fur darker. Its gaze fixed on both of them. And it wasn't Ash's mother. The clearing fell silent except for the wind. Lily could hear her pulse pounding in her ears, a wild rhythm that matched the sound of Ash's low growl. The new bear, massive, scarred and older, towered over them both, its breath visible in the morning air. For a moment the instinct to run surged in Lily's body. Every cell screamed for her to move, to hide, to vanish. But then she remembered the cub she had once held, trembling, frightened, dependent. The courage she had built since then wasn't the absence of fear, it was the choice to stand still despite it. "Ash," she whispered, her voice shaking, "it's okay. I'm here." Ash didn't move closer, but his growl softened. His gaze shifted from the newcomer to Lily, as if waiting for her cue, her calm, her belief. The larger bear took another step forward. The earth beneath its paws vibrated. Lily slowly raised her hands, palms open. "You don't have to fight," she said, her words barely audible over the rustling trees. "We're not here to hurt you." For a split second the giant bear paused, head tilting slightly. Then from somewhere deep in the forest, a smaller echoing call rose, a cub's cry. The bear's ears flicked toward the sound. It wasn't here for them. It was apparent too. The realization hit Lily like a wave, it's searching for its own. She turned to Ash, her voice gentle but firm. "You understand, don't you? You know what he's looking for." Ash blinked once, then stepped aside, no longer in defense but in recognition. Lily followed his movement and saw the faint trail behind the bigger bear, broken twigs, smaller tracks, a sign of panic. Somewhere nearby, a cub was lost, just as Ash once had been. "Come on," she murmured, taking a slow step forward. The big bear didn't move to stop her. It watched her, uncertain but not hostile. She walked past it, scanning the underbrush. Then she heard it, a faint, pitiful whine. She crouched and peered beneath a fallen branch. A tiny cub, no bigger than Ash had once been, was trapped between roots, trembling and calling for its parent. Lily looked back at the huge bear. "It's here," she said softly. "It just needs space." Ash moved closer, pressing his shoulder against hers, a quiet reminder that she wasn't alone. Together they stepped aside. The mother bear lumbered forward, sniffing the air until her cub's scent hit her like lightning. She growled, deep but desperate, and began tearing at the roots. Lily flinched at the sheer power, but within moments the cub wriggled free and scrambled toward her. The reunion was raw and wordless. A trembling whine, a huff, the sound of relief carried through the forest. Lily watched in silence, tears forming. Beside her, Ash sat back, calm, his eyes following the pair. It felt like he understood it all, the fear, the love, the cycle repeating itself. When the mother bear turned to leave, she stopped briefly, meeting Lily's gaze. For a heartbeat, the world felt still again. Predator and human, both guardians of something fragile. Then she led her cub into the trees, her massive form fading into the mist. Ash stood, still watching the direction they had gone. Lily placed a hand on his side. "You did good," she whispered. The bear turned to her and made a low, almost questioning sound. "I know," she said softly. "You don't belong here anymore. But neither of us will forget." They stood there for what felt like forever, two lives that had once crossed in need, now connected by choice. The light through the trees warmed her face and she smiled through the ache in her chest. Ash stepped closer, touching his muzzle to her shoulder one last time. Then he turned and walked toward the ridge. She didn't follow. She just watched until his figure disappeared behind the trees. The forest was quiet again, not empty but alive. Later that evening, when Lily returned home, her father was waiting on the porch. He saw her face, streaked with tears but lit with peace, and didn't ask anything. He just said, "The forest always returns what it borrows." She nodded, setting her bag down. "It did," she whispered. "And it taught me something too." Her father tilted his head. "What's that?" "That courage isn't about being strong," she said. "It's about being kind, even when you're scared." He smiled, proud and silent. That night, Lily placed the old blanket scrap on her windowsill. The moonlight touched it like a quiet promise. Somewhere beyond the hills, a bear's call echoed, deep, distant, familiar. She smiled. "Good night, Ash." Just before she closed her eyes, a shadow passed across the window, silent, huge, and unmistakably familiar. Her breath caught. Was it imagination, or had he returned to watch over her one last time? Days turned into weeks, and though Lily's routine returned, school, chores, sketching by the window, something in her had changed. She no longer felt like a child who had once saved a bear. She felt like someone who had been saved by one. Each morning she glanced toward the tree line. Some days she thought she saw movement, a shadow slipping between trunks, a glint of amber eyes, but she never went after it. The forest had given her enough. Now it was her turn to trust it. She began spending her weekends volunteering with her father at the ranger station. The local wildlife office had been getting calls about increased bear sightings. But instead of fear, Lily heard curiosity in people's voices. "They're not bothering us," one woman had said, "just passing through." That was when Lily realized the forest was healing. She started helping the rangers mark safe zones, teaching children at the local school about coexistence. "They're not monsters," she told them, holding up one of her sketches of Ash. "They're part of the same story we are. We just forgot to read their chapter." Her words stayed with people. Soon, the little town that once treated bears as threats began to see them as neighbors. Cautious, yes, but deserving of space. One early morning, as she painted the forest edge on her porch, her father joined her with 2 mugs of cocoa. "You think he's still out there?" he asked. Lily smiled faintly. "I don't think." "I know." Her father chuckled. "You always sound so sure." "I am," she said, "because I feel braver when I think of him. That means he's still teaching me, wherever he is." They sat in silence for a while, the forest humming softly with life. That night, a gentle rain began to fall. Lily opened her window, breathing in the smell of wet pine and earth. She heard a soft rustle outside, and when lightning flickered across the sky, for a heartbeat, she saw it again. A familiar outline at the edge of the trees. Massive shoulders, slow breathing, rain glistening on dark fur. He stood there quietly, not moving, not approaching, as if just making sure she was safe. The space between them was filled with everything words could never say. Lily whispered, "Thank you, for coming back." The bear turned, melting into the shadows once more. She didn't feel sadness this time, only peace. She understood now that not all endings mean goodbye. Some just mean you both learned what you needed to. In the days that followed, Lily wrote a small essay for her school's wildlife journal. It began simply. "The bear cub I found taught me courage, not by fighting but by trusting. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is choose kindness when fear seems easier. Because when we do, we don't just save someone else. We save the part of ourselves that still believes the world can be gentle. Her teacher published it. Weeks later, the story spread beyond her town, shared by conservation groups, then by local papers, then across the country. A photo of her sketch, a girl and a bear standing side by side in the forest, began circulating with the caption, "Compassion creates courage." It became a quiet movement. Schools planting trees, families setting up bear-safe bins, rangers teaching children how to respect wild spaces. Lily didn't expect it, but her story had become something larger. A reminder that courage isn't born in power but in care. One afternoon months later, she hiked back to the old clearing. Grass had grown over the spot where she first found Ash. But there, in the soft mud near the riverbank, she found something that made her heart catch. A set of fresh paw prints, much larger than before. She knelt beside them, pressing her hand into the earth beside the print. "I know," she whispered with a smile. "You're watching too." The river flowed beside her, calm and endless. The trees whispered overhead, their branches swaying in rhythm. And for the first time she realized that the forest had always been alive, always aware. It had seen her grow from fear into courage, from saving to understanding. As the sun began to set, Lily stood and looked toward the horizon. She could almost imagine Ash out there, not as the cub she once nursed but as a guardian of this place. The forest didn't forget. It remembered the small kindness that changed everything. And so did she. When she walked home that evening, a gentle breeze followed her, carrying the scent of pine and rain. The world felt whole. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it kneels beside the wounded. Sometimes, it chooses to protect what cannot speak. And sometimes, it simply believes that kindness is never wasted, not even in the wild. If this story touched you, if you've ever felt the pull between fear and compassion, remember Lily and Ash. Because the bravest hearts aren't those that conquer the wild, but those that learn to live gently within it. What's the kindest act you've ever witnessed? One that changed how you saw courage?